BBC chairman Richard Sharp has stepped down from his job. A report found that he failed to properly declare his involvement in a loan guarantee for former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
After 3 months of damaging headlines and refusals to quit,
are you in record?
Yeah.
Today Richard Sharp bowed to the inevitable.
I have decided that it is right to prioritise the interest of the BBC. I feel that this matter may well be a distraction from the corporation's good work were I to remain in post until the end of my term.
Even before the damning report was published, he jumped, whilst attempting to minimise his mistakes.
While I did breach the governance code for public appointments, the breach does not necessarily invalidate an appointment. Indeed, I've always maintained the breach was inadvertent.
The corporation's chairman leads the BBC board, which sets its strategic direction, budget and appoints a Director General.
Good morning, Mr Johnson. Did Mr Sharp help you with your loan?
At the root of this saga, Boris Johnson's finances, or the lack of them, and Mr Sharp's role facilitating an £800,000 loan.
Did you offer anything to Mr Sharp in exchange for your loan support?
A fact he didn't mention when applying to be BBC chairman, an appointment Boris Johnson supported. Among the key findings from Adam Heppenstall KC were that Richard Sharp failed to disclose potential perceived conflicts of interest to the panel which interviewed candidates and advised ministers. There is a risk of a perception that Mr Sharp was recommended for appointment because he assisted the former Prime Minister in a private financial matter and/or that he influenced the former PM to recommend him for the job. And both these non-disclosures caused a breach of the governance code. Visiting Glasgow, Rishi Sunak again faced questions about the actions of his former boss in government, Boris Johnson.
Thank you, everyone.
And his former boss at Goldman Sachs, Richard Sharp.
Why didn't you sack him months ago?
This is about doing things properly and professionally, and when concerns are raised, it's right that there is a proper process, an independent process.
Should his replacement be a non-political appointment? And are you sick and tired of clearing up Boris Johnson's mess?
You know, what I'm doing is focus on delivering for the British people.
Good morning to you all.
Just weeks after Gary Lineker sparked a different BBC crisis by tweeting about politics, today the presenter waded into this row to argue the BBC chairman should not be selected by the government of the day. All this does revolve around the judgment of a former Prime Minister, but also that of the current top civil servant, Cabinet Secretary Simon Case.
It is he who Richard Sharp approached about financial support for Boris Johnson. This is the same Simon Case who allegedly explored getting a private donor to pay for refurbishments to the Downing Street flat, who recused himself from authoring a Partygate report because he'd attended a drinks event here during the pandemic, and who may have been aware of allegations concerning Dominic Raab and Nadeem Zahawi before they were appointed to Rishi Sunak's cabinet. Both have since resigned.
The search for Richard Sharp's successor now begins, but as the government appoint the selection panel, the job remains in their gift. Joe Pike, Sky News.